All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And if the scene looks a little different, well, it is because this is the first live interview I have ever done here on this show in years and years and years. And it is with great pleasure that it happens to be with my younger daughter, Chara Langlois Brown. How are you doing, Chara?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
We decided that we thought it'd be better if we both face the camera so you can see us talking. Sh- there is so much ugly propaganda out there about the Chinese and China with the COVID-19. That's now the new globally accepted name for the coronavirus that started in China. There's so much ugly propaganda out there, and I started thinking, I really want to talk to some people who are actually a part of this and are having to live through this incredibly challenging event. And so I'm contacting people in China, and I hope to have others on the air. However, Chara is actually here in Thailand, and she can explain it to you as we get through the interview. So the title of this is A Day in the Life of a Student Exiled Outside China because of COVID-19, a face-to-face interview with Chara Langlois Brown. So Chara, please tell the fans out there a little bit about yourself and how your life became intertwined with China.
My name is Chara Vega Langlois Brown. I'm French American, and this is my father. So I moved to China about 9.5 years ago with my parents after the financial crisis in the United States. And I attended 8th grade, and since then I've graduated from high school. I worked for a year, and now I'm completing my undergraduate degree in Beijing Normal University in Human Resources Management, where I study with Chinese colleagues in Mandarin. So it's a true Chinese experience.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah.
You and untold hundreds of thousands of Chinese are exiled from going back home, with your flights being canceled to help control the spread of COVID-19. Were your tickets refunded, and how is that being dealt with you and all of your friends and colleagues that are outside of the country?
So I was actually planning on only traveling for about a month, and I happened to decide this year I'm going abroad to travel during the Chinese New Year holiday, which I turned out to be very lucky, I think. But around the 20, whenever I arrived in Thailand, I met with a group of Chinese people who are actually living in Beijing, and they told me that all of their flights had been canceled to return to Beijing after, I think, the 3rd of February, and that my flight might possibly also be canceled as well. And sure enough, about 2 days later, I got an email that my flight was canceled. And I was thinking, well, maybe I should book another one. So I booked another one 2 days later, which was also canceled. But it turned out to be very well. It turned out very well because I was worried that if there's this coronavirus and I'm not supposed to return to China, then this money might just just down the tunnel. I mean, just down the drain. Like, it's just a waste of money if they didn't refund it. And I had the no refund policy, so they actually changed the entire C-Trip platform, and they opened up like a whole new site where you can apply for originally non-refundable tickets to be refunded. So they had this policy all across China.
Yeah, it also happened to your older sister, Maya, who's in the United States. She was going to go to Beijing next month, spend a day with Chara, and then fly down here during Easter break. Her ticket was canceled because of COVID-19, and she also got a refund. Well, tell us, when did you first hear about COVID-19? Where were you? And on social media with your Chinese friends, what were you all saying?
I heard of the virus whenever I was in Malaysia, and at that time I was traveling with one of my Chinese friends, and I met her down in Malaysia, and she was telling me about this virus. But the first few days, it wasn't really a concern. It was just news that you just every day. But over after about 3 or 4 days, when we started to realize the really intense reaction online and with the Chinese government, that they were really trying to push this virus and try to corner and stop it from spreading. So at first it wasn't much of a concern.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, you are being fluent in Chinese. All of this is all of this you're doing in Chinese, so you're getting the real Chinese experience. Tell us about any friends in class. Okay, now you and many people, untold, I don't know how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Chinese and others who are residents in China are stuck outside of China. But tell us about any friends and classmates who are stuck in Hubei, in particular, where the virus started,
Oh.
or other cities in China. What are their lives like? What have you been about your classmates and friends who are stuck in other cities outside of Beijing and can't go back to Beijing?
Right. So at first I was really concerned because I had a few classmates who are originally from Hubei and even from Wuhan. And I was really concerned if they're on total lockdown, they can't leave the city. Well, at first they weren't on lockdown and they were flooding out of the city, but then eventually they closed the barriers. And most restaurants are closed, shopping malls are closed, any kind of events where you could have human contact were pretty much shut down and closed. And I was thinking, well, how can they eat? How can they, get their knife necessity items? I mean, that was really a concern for me. And what happened was they turned every neighborhood or like a house unit into like a safeguarded area. So they have the guards at the entrance of each unit who don't allow anyone. They don't allow anyone to come in except for the people who are living in this neighborhood, and they only allow one family. So if in this family there are like 5 people or 6 people, there's only one person who is allowed to exit the house once every 2 days, outside of the neighborhood to buy some vegetables or hygiene products, etc. And apart from that, they can also order Waimai, so delivery, where the delivery man can deliver it to the gate of the neighborhood, where they disinfect the whole outside, the plastic, and then the person comes down and picks it up from the gate entrance.
Unbelievable. And also, I think I'm sure it's the same with Kiara's friends in other cities. I'm talking to Chinese friends in Shenzhen, and when that one person can go out of the guarded 24-hour day guarded, of course they register their name, which apartment or house they're in, so that they can control who's going out, and they have to have their temperature taken before they leave the compound. If they have a temperature above probably 37 point whatever 7 or 37.8, if they have a temperature, they have to immediately go to the hospital. And if they don't have a temperature, they can go on out, but they cannot leave unless they have a mask. So the amount of extraordinary coordination and cooperation that the Chinese are doing to limit the number of people being killed is just and sickened is just unbelievable. Kiara, when I look at media and social media in China, there is an incredible sense of solidarity as a nation, like going into battle. Xi Jinping has called this fight a people's war. He actually said that to Donald Trump last week on the telephone, which is the exact same words that Mao Zedong used when the Chinese helped the North Koreans, whip the Americans and Westerners during the Korean War. What is your sense of the attitude of the Chinese people in this struggle? I mean, do you think China will be stronger as a result?
Well, I was very touched by many of the reactions that people had. I actually was assigned a little task. I think your friend Wu Yun,
Hmm.
where I was supposed to translate a few of these videos from TikTok on the Chinese Douyin, translate them and repost them on the international TikTok to have a more positive voice of China in across the world. And I saw some stories of people just their families are separated and they're just very emotional because they can't come back together, and people just doing good deeds, taking care of each other. Even strangers are coming closer together in times of crisis. So, I mean, watching these videos, I was just crying because I was just so touched by it. And also, I just felt like, on behalf of my country, I feel like really guilty. And, I just feel really sad about this whole situation. So, so yeah, it really touched me, not only from like my perspective as an American, and some of the reactions of the international people as well were very positive and very supportive and encouraging, and also, the sense of love for their country and nationalism among the Chinese just really
Hmm.
touched me. Yeah.
Do you think that China will become stronger as a result of this? I mean, do you think it's going to make the country more um, challenging as far as the rise of China in the 21st century? Do you think that's going to happen as a result of this?
Well, I think it definitely really put them to a test of how well they can coordinate together. And I think, I mean, there were a few people who were a little bit, questioning, like, is this really necessary to go to such extremes? But I think for the most part, it was a very, strong sentiment that we need to do this. And
Hmm.
it was a very good testimony of their skills and how well they coordinate together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, when Tell us about how your school, you go to Beijing Normal University, how you you and your professors and classmates and everybody, how you all are staying in touch each day by WeChat, and the routine you need to follow. Your temperature went up to 37.7 degrees, and what were you expected to do? So tell us
Right.
about how you have to report in every day.
Right. So during this whole epidemic, my school, had many responsibilities. So the first thing they did was they asked us to report every morning our health conditions. So they'll ask us questions like, "What's your location? Are you having any kind of symptoms like fever, cough, or fatigue? Did you have any contact with people from Wuhan? Did you have any contact with people who have symptoms similar to the coronavirus? Uh, or were you in close contact with people, etc., or other?" So I have to do this every day before noon. So it's 11 a.m. here, and often I wake up really late, and they're calling me, 30 minutes before the deadline, like the dean of my institute as well as the representative of my class, and everyone's calling me, "Are you okay? Are you okay? You have to report immediately. We have to report back to the our leaders." So it's pretty incredible when you think about it on like a large scale. I'm only one student
Yeah.
in one class in one university, and they're doing this across all universities, the whole entire body, and also all of the employees, not only the student body but also employees in their own
Hmm.
company who are operating in the same way.
Yeah, and not to mention all the Chinese students who are, in China. I mean, are not even outside of China. They're coordinating this on a mass national level because they really care about their students and their employees, and it's just amazing. Now there was a week last week. Your temperature went up to 37.7 degrees. What happened?
Well, I did have a fever. It went up to 37.8
Oh,
or 8,
38.
and then it went up to 38.2, and then it came back down to 37.2. So it was really weird, always changing. And of course, I had to report this. I mean, I don't know.
Beep 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 beep.
So they, right? So my dean, everyone contacted me because they can all see my results across the system, and they said, well, are you okay? Like, they were really concerned about me, but then also they said, stay away from your family and you need to go to the hospital. And so I went to the hospital, but I think in Thailand they're a little bit less concerned for obvious reasons. And I came up and I said, I have a fever. And then they said, well, anything else? Like, you seem totally fine to me. And I said, well, I mean, I'm obligated to do this because it's the school policy. So they moved me out to like a whole nother building, which is destined just for any kind of flu or cold-like symptoms. And they took my temperature, and it turned out to be 36.4. So, So anyway, I told my school that I went to the doctor, and I was supposed to go back again if my flu was if my fever was still up.
You didn't have the flu.
But they said I didn't have a fever anymore, so it turned out to be okay.
Yeah, and another thing she pointed out, at the hospital, they had created a whole separate area just for Chinese nationals.
Yeah.
That they had to go if they came. Of course, that can be explained by the fact that it's only killing basically 100% of the people. Almost 100% of the people who have died are all ethnic Chinese DNA. So we don't have much to worry about. But I appreciate that her professors and friends and classmates were worried about us if she got sick. But I really do appreciate that. Well, this is really amazing. You were supposed to have gone back to school 2 weeks ago, and with students scattered all over the place, how are you all and your teachers continuing to, quote, go to school?
Well, so the funny thing is there's like a saying going around the Chinese online is during this whole epidemic, all the Chinese people are becoming professional cooks because they're all cooking at home, and all of the teachers are becoming live streaming like celebrities or stars, and that's because everything is going online. So all of the universities, well, at least the ones that I know of, they had a conference, and then they decided to make all of their courses available on these Chinese online teaching platforms. And so I have yet to experience that because my classes officially start on the 24th.
Oh, okay. I thought they had already started.
Yeah,
okay.
and I don't know how that's going to be. I assume it's going to be very much like your experience teaching online.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they sent QR codes in all of the WeChat groups, and you're supposed to scan and enter the WeChat group of whatever courses you have already selected, and they will send the information in these courses. And I think there will be like more automated, so you don't have to go to class exactly at this particular time. You can also just complete the homework and watch the videos and complete the task within a week's time.
Wow, amazing. Of course, this is being replicated millions of times for millions of Chinese students, not only in China but all over the world who happen to be out of the country when the coronavirus hit.
And there was also a joke going online is that They were saying, well, now we're all going to be the two best universities in China are Beida and Tsinghua, and it's kind of the dream of all students to go to these two universities. And they were saying, like, well, now we can all become Beida and Tsinghua students. So it might also increase, education accessibility. I mean, it might be a good thing, yeah. So
why not? I know you're applying for master's programs at Tsinghua and Beida and Zhenmin People's University. So yeah, there you go. Popularize education online. You were told that Capital Normal University has completely canceled all classes for the rest of second semester and is going 100% online. That's just mind-boggling for me. How do you think the COVID-19 outbreak is going to change the way Chinese learn in school?
Right. So I heard that from my friend who is studying at Capital Normal University. She's an international student, so it might be particular for her situation. But she told me that they have already decided this entire semester she doesn't need to come back to China. So she's not pending. She just went back to France, and she's studying online.
Unbelievable.
So it makes me wonder, like, I was expecting mid-March to go back to China, but now it might be possible like mid-April, or even this whole semester might be completely off. And
unbelievable. Well, you're not off, but you're moving online.
Yeah,
you're moving online and collaborating in WeChat groups, social media groups, so you can share information with your classmates, etc.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. I think it's going to have a huge impact. I think it's going to radically transform Chinese education. And as you said, it could do what Mao Zedong did during the Cultural Revolution, that is popularize education in areas of China that have a hard time going to school.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I've been working on this online teaching business for many years, particularly English education. And from my experience, I was able to reach out to students even in the most, impoverished areas. I mean, they all have phones, most of them, I would say. And they lived on the border of China, where it's just, there's not much to go around, especially foreign teachers are not many are willing to go and work in those kind of conditions. So in my experience, it was very positive when I received videos of children who are learning from the videos that I've made, and etc. So I really can see how this could really work out in the long term, not only in English education.
Yeah, but everything.
Yeah.
Well, with AI and virtual reality and big data, they could even have chemistry labs and everything else. What are you and all your classmates doing about paying apartment rent and other fixed expenses like utilities and bank loans? How are the landlords, companies, and banks handling this?
I don't know about I don't know about like banks, but I have seen many apartment advertisements online, because no one is going back to Beijing, so they're looking for people to rent out their apartment. So I was actually looking for apartments, so I'm on many apartment seeking platforms, and they're dropping the prices. Most people are not returning to Beijing, and they're looking for people to rent out their apartment.
It's unbelievable. Do they? But have you talked to any friends who have already had an existing lease, and how that's going with their landlords?
I think they just need to pay. I think there's not really any exception.
Okay.
I was very lucky because I actually was desperately looking for an apartment for this semester, and I found 3 apartments, and it just turned out there was some kind of weird situation or like weird circumstance, and they couldn't rent the apartment to me, and I was a little bit upset, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because now I'm really lucky because I might not even need to return for these 6 months, and
and
I
otherwise
don't
you'd be
need to
paying
pay out of
rent
pocket.
on a
Yeah,
contract.
yeah.
That's unbelievable. You were lucky enough to be stuck in Thailand where we live, and so you are not
Yes.
having to pay for lodging and have much lower daily expenses living with your mother and me. But how are all the Chinese dealing with these added costs being exiled outside of China?
I mean, they just have to take it. I mean, most of them are living in cheap hostels,
Mm-hmm.
or I mean, they're maybe looking for friends who are living outside. But I think there's not really much apart from the airplane costs. There's not much they can do to reduce them. But I know that since there are many less Chinese tourists,
Yeah.
traveling now, that actually a lot of like tourist visas are dropping in cost to attract more tourists, and I assume maybe other traveling packages as well might have decreased in price.
Yeah, I heard some unbelievable. I saw a headline that in Hong Kong, like a four-star hotel was offering rooms for $12. Normally they're like 100 or 150, just to get some people in the hotel. I mean, they were like, and I think that included breakfast. And they were just hoping you might eat lunch and dinner there too. So I'm sure that because of and the headlines in Thailand are all they're just tourism has fallen, has just absolutely cratered, and so I'm sure the cost of housing has gone down, and if they get a place with a little kitchen, as Kiara can attest, food here is very very reasonable, so you can probably eat
Very good.
for very little, and if they bunk together and get 4 or 5 or 6 Chinese, like in a dorm style of place, I'm sure the cost is doable. And then, of course, also the Chinese have the highest savings rate in the world. And I can imagine that money's also moving very fast across WeChat Pay and Alibaba,
Yeah, and
Alibaba Pay.
I
Go ahead.
also wanted to add, I actually had a friend who I used to work with, and the moment she went from Henan back to Beijing, she came to the company. Everything was normal, and they said, "I'm sorry, you're being laid off because they didn't have enough during this whole epidemic. They lost so much money that they had to lay off any of the extra, I mean, not so important employees,
Non-essential.
non-essential employees. So she was laid off, and apparently half of the employee from that small-sized enterprise
Yeah.
as well. So it's definitely had a big impact on even online. This is an online teaching company for English. Just because during that time they had to pay all of these salaries and they had to support so many people, and they couldn't really make videos from afar. It was just a little bit harder to at the beginning try to coordinate, and it had some cost. It had some cost damage. So
Yeah, boy, I can imagine. Unbelievable. Well, the Chinese suffered through the Chinese suffered through 110 years of Western rape and plunder during the Century of Humiliation, and fought off the Westerners and the Japanese to gain their independence in 1949. I think they're going to come through. When is BNU, Beijing Normal University, saying you can go back home? The sudden rush for plane tickets is going to be intense.
well, I don't know. It's all on standby, waiting for the notice. They made me pledge. I mean, they told me I have to pledge that I will not return to BNU and I will not return to Beijing. So
Until they say so.
right. At first, I wasn't willing to pledge because I was worried, like, well, maybe I won't be able to extend my visa. Like, I might need to go back to Beijing eventually before the notice comes. But then the dean, like the dean of my institute, came to me and she said, well, we need you to pledge right now because we need to report to our leaders. And I said, well, I need to look at all of these things. And she said, like, well, we need you to pledge. Like, you just can't come back no matter what, like, for the moment now, like, until the notice comes through. So I said, well, okay, I didn't really have a choice. So I said, well, I pledge that, I will not go to Beijing. I will not return to BNU. And I think it's because, I mean, there are a lot of workers who have returned to Beijing, but students are often like the most protected group of people. I mean, they are, high priority in terms of security. So I think that this is a little bit, not all of the workers, but I think for students, that's probably how it went down.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the plane tickets. They came out with a policy. So the Chinese government came up with a policy that no company was allowed to raise or make extra money from in cause of the epidemic. So like anything like face masks, a disinfectant, plane tickets, whatever might have like a growth in sales, they were not allowed to raise their prices according to the Chinese government policy. So I think that the plane tickets might be hard to buy, but I don't think the prices will be very not more than normal.
Yeah. Well, there was a couple of weeks ago, there was a pharmacy, I think it was maybe in Zhengzhou or maybe in central China, who got caught jacking the price of masks up way up. And of course, China now has, the social credit score, the social credit system, and a very, very active and fast responding social media network. So he got reported, and to make an example of him, they charged him 3 million yuan fine. That's 400,000 US. I'm sure it put him out of business, but it was like, don't screw the people over while they're trying to struggle and fight. It's just, and you can see it all over, In fact, there are even pharmacies who are selling masks at cost, or just, and there are factories making masks at cost and selling them wholesale at cost. So there is and not only that, but thousands and thousands of Chinese are shipping millions and millions and millions of dollars of masks and gloves and food and everything from all over the world. I've seen photographs of hangars full of stuff, and then the Chinese airlines are volunteering because their business is way off, and so they're using their airplanes. China Eastern, China Southern, China Airlines, and all these others are actually flying to these hangars and bringing all this food back for distribution. So it's not just an internal Chinese people's war. It's a global people's war for all of the China. There's 50 million Chinese outside of China, so that's a huge mass of resources and money to help the people back home. Any last comments, Kiara?
No, just 中国加油，武汉加油。
She said, "Go China, go Wuhan." We actually see these signs in Chinese here in Chiang Mai outside of restaurants and stuff. Well, Kiara, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your real life China experiences with us. And you can stay here as long as you want.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, everybody outside China Rising Radio Sinoland. Please make a donation. I put a lot of hours. She can tell you, I put a lot of my poor wife's a keyboard widow, and I put in, many hours to produce something like this. So please make a donation. WeChat, not WeChat. Well, if you're Chinese, WeChat. Or, there's the Jeff J. Brown, Jeff at brownlanglois.com, the email for PayPal, and there's also a fundraiser button above and below the text on this webpage. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.